Yeah, we back. Now today's gonna be a quick video. It's also gonna be a follow-up to the most recent series that I just dropped. We've been reading a legendary book, Literature Left Behind by the Ancestors. This book in particular came out in the year 1817. Already one of the most powerful books I've ever read in my entire life, and we're not even finished. If you haven't been watching the series, you playing yourself. I don't know what's wrong with you. But anyways, the videos were entitled Haitian Revolutionary Debunks the French Media in 1817. Dropped that 5 days ago. And yesterday we dropped Haitian Revolutionary Destroys the French Media in 1817. That video right there is almost an hour long. Crazy. One of the most craziest videos I've ever dropped in the history of my catalog. My goodness. Now, of course, the author of that book, Baron de Vastey, Vastey the Baron, a high-ranking government official in the Northern Kingdom in the administration of King Henry Christophe. Like I said in my video yesterday, he would be similar in the modern day to a minister of state, the press secretary, the chief of communications, the chief of national intelligence, a policy advisor, things like that. So obviously a man of wealth, power, prestige, and status. Now, keep in mind, when he wrote this book in 1817, he was around 36 years old, which means that when the country achieved independence, he was around 22, 23 years old. And that means when the revolution first started in 1791, he was around 10 years old. Now, besides being a battle-hardened military man that became one of the most illustrious figures to rise out of the revolution, he was also a high-ranking government official as well as an educator and an author. He wrote a series of books, many of which I've read right here on my channel. And in this series, the book that we are reading, where he is debunking the French government, he is responding to all the slander, the propaganda, and the lies and the defamation that was put out by the French journalists, the French newspapers, and the French government during that time, the French media in totality, right? So he's giving the response, debunking the adversary. And I remember a while back, I had read that during that time, Vastey's work, his books that he wrote, was actually banned in the European colonies. Because I read a story about one time a white man, I think a British man, was sailing into Jamaica, and they had found that he was carrying one of Vastey's books on him, and he was charged with possessing seditious materials, right? Or possessing subversive materials. That was a crime, right? Even if you're a white man, even if you are a European colonist, if you were in possession of Vastey's literature, that was a crime. That was a felony offense that you could be, locked in prison for. And as I was reading the book yesterday, especially at the end of part 2, I realized why his books were banned. I realized why they banned his work in the European colonies, right? If I was a European colonist, I would have banned it too. Absolutely. So in today's video, we're going to run it back. We're going to play some parts from that book from part 2, and then we're going to break it down and discuss it as a family. And at the end of this video, I think we're going to understand why the adversary banned all of his books. I understand, Anyway, let's jump straight into the video. Run the clip. I'll be right back, and I'll come back on my commentary. Politicians, however, are not content with calling in question our title to independence. They pretend that it is incumbent on us to restore to the ex-colonists their former possessions. And in order to give plausibility to their reasons, they still urge the example of the United States. The Americans restored, when peace was concluded, all sequestered property, as did the English that which belonged to the Americans. From this precedent, they conclude that we must restore to the ex-colonists what they term as their property, which they say has not been sold, but is in possession of the crown and has been let on lease. We ask first, what similarity they find between the Americans and English on the one hand, and the people of Haiti and the ex-colonists on the other hand. Do not they pervert the nature of things, who seek for examples in objects so dissimilar, in which there is no kind of analogy, and which are destitute even of common sense? The Americans restored after the peace the possessions of the English because they themselves were English, whites, and proprietors. The Americans enjoyed their rights, natural, civil, and political. They were undisputed. They contended only for their country's independence, the English for their sovereignty. There might exist, as Mr. Debunking very justly observes, noble and benevolent feelings in the bosom of men descended from the same ancestors. Independence and the restoration of property were not incompatible. The people of Haiti are placed in a widely different situation. They were all Africans, natives of the soil, Negroes, and slaves, without country or possessions, bereft of their rights, natural, civil, and political. The people of Haiti were, as it was termed, civilly dead. Their habitations were not like human habitations, nor their modes of living like human modes of living. The ex-colonists exerted over them a barbarous power of life and death, unprotected and treated as the most loathsome of animals and abandoned by the whole race of mankind. They have fought and shed torrents of blood to obtain by force a country, an asylum, life and liberty, to regain the sacred and imprescriptible rights which tyranny had already torn from them and would tear again. What feelings, noble or benevolent, can exist between us and the ex-colonists? We were deprived of everything. We had nothing, and we were considered as nothing. We have achieved at the point of the sword a country, liberty, independence, and wealth. We have nothing but what is our own. We therefore owe them nothing and have nothing to restore to them. They were the first to put us out of the pale of social relations. We, in return, could expel them without difficulty and with justice. The situation in which they are placed is precisely that to which they would reduce us. If they had been victorious, we should have been dead or enslaved, in possession of nothing and asking for nothing. But they were vanquished. They have therefore nothing. They should ask for nothing. We had a right to put them to death and to enslave them on the ground that they wish to put us to death and enslave us, and vice versa. We have acted with more justice and generosity than them and have been content merely to drive them from the territory. They have no claim to our possessions, no pretense to revisit them. Let them not imagine they'll be suffered to enter them again, under what pretense whatsoever to come. Now, in that part of the book, Vastey is talking about the preposterous idea of paying a debt, an indemnity, reparations to the French colonists who so-called lost their property. And now what was their property? Black men, women, and children, right? So Vastey is basically dismissing that idea entirely, right? And that is also one of the main differences between, during that time, the Northern Kingdom and the Southern Republic, where the Northern Kingdom and the officials who govern that territory, they stood firm on their position that we are not paying a single dime to the French. Now, the Republic, the Southern Republic, which was governed by the sons of the French colonists, the mixed race generals such as Alexander Pétion, Jean-Pierre Boyer, André Rigaud, guys who had sympathetic ties to France, they were the ones that came to that agreement and signed that deal. Now, by that time, the kingdom had already fallen. Christophe was already dead. Vastey was already dead. Dessalines was already dead. Toussaint was already dead, right? So by that time, the sons of the French colonists, the sons of the white man, they were in full power. Not only did they take control of the north, but they also took control of the Spanish side. So the entire island of Hispaniola, the French and the Spanish side, were under the authority of the Southern mixed race generals, who then turned around and got into bed with their white fathers, uncles, and grandfathers and signed a deal to pay them back for the property that they lost in 1825. All right, we back. Now, clearly, we can understand why the European colonists of that time banned Vastey's literature from circulating in the colonies. Now, during that time, that was actually a very common thing. The colonial authorities, when it came to newspapers, journals, books, propaganda in general, they kept a tight surveillance on those type of things. In the French colonies and the British colonies, they labeled them as contraband or seditious or subversive material, right? Anything that could be deemed as inciting unrest or rebellion against the colonial authorities would be placed under the category of seditious materials, right? So even if you're a white man and you was walking around with Vastey's books or any type of anti-colonial literature, you would also be penalized for that offense, right? For example, the first quote, when he said, "We were deprived of everything. We had nothing, and we were considered nothing. And we have achieved at the point of the sword a country, liberty, independence, and wealth," right? So, of course, you already understand the European colonist doesn't want that type of literature or energy or mentality spreading amongst the free and enslaved black population in their colonies, because that is basically a call to arms, right? Imagine you're living in one of the British colonies or another French colony, and you get your hands on this book, and you understand that the authors of this book were in the exact same position as you. And they said that by the force of arms, we have achieved liberty, independence, and wealth at the point of the sword, right? So that right there is going to inspire you to revolt against the colonial authorities. Because if the guy down the street in the other island down the block, if he did that, then what's stopping me from doing the exact same thing? Now, the next quote. Now, this is the quote that I believe that the Europeans took the most offense to, that definitely had this book and the rest of his books also placed under the category of subversive or seditious material. When Vastey said, "We had a right to put them to death or to enslave them on the grounds that they wish to put us to death or to enslave us." Now, keep in mind, you have to understand, during that time, especially in the colonies, any form of rebellion was seen as a criminal offense, as a criminal act, right? it was not seen as divine justice or self-defense. It was seen as criminal activity if you were taking up arms against the colonial authorities, right? So in Vastey puts into writing that he says we had a right to put them to death or to enslave them on the grounds that they wish to put us to death or to enslave us. Now, in that line, he flips it directly on its head, right? Whereas this would be framed as a criminal offense, Vastey reframes it as self-defense or divine justice. And he goes even further beyond just an eye for an eye. He says that, in fact, they should be put into bondage. So you can imagine if a book like this gets into the hands of somebody living in the colony of Jamaica or Barbados or Trinidad or, South Carolina or wherever, right? It's going to be very explosive. It's going to inspire the minds and hearts to take up arms for their liberty and independence. So this book was very controversial for a variety of reasons, not only because of the doctrine that was being preached and the fact that he was debunking the propaganda and the slander of the French government, but it was also a call to arms for those that were currently under the yoke of bondage to take up arms against the colonial authorities to achieve your freedom and liberty and independence. So, of course, this book, you could not be allowed to be in possession of this book or pretty much any book, any piece of literature that was coming out of the Northern Haitian Kingdom during that time, right? It was all deemed as subversive. It was all deemed as seditious material, and it was pretty much on the same category as contraband. But anyways, like I said, go check out the brand new series. Go to my playlist section, Haitian Revolutionary versus the French Media. Go check out part 1 and 2. Probably going to come with part 3, maybe today, maybe tomorrow, sometime this week. Let's try to get through this book. Excellent piece of literature. Excellent book. One of my favorites so far. And we're not even finished. Like I said, if you haven't been keeping up with the series, you playing yourself, man. You playing yourself. The ancestors took it upon themselves to leave behind all this literature for us to read. And you ain't going to listen to what they got to say. You bugging out. Anyways, man, this is your boy Neferkari. That's Salim back in the building. Yes, indeed. Subscribe to the Patreon, NTD1814. Also, second single off the next project, The Spy in Bamako. Check it out. Pin comment at the top, link in the description. And I'm gone. Peace.
Yeah, gotta stay focused so when it's in shots, I gotta react. Cause I'm a target, I'm under attack. Grabbing a weapon, I tell him get back. Mission exposed, secrets unfold. Enemy trapping, I'm still in control. Got your boy sitting in Bamako prison, hoping they wish we sending them home. Enemy know that we good under pressure. Been through the thunderous, turbulent storm. Shorty a diamond, I told her she pressure. Hop in a whip and I'm taking her home. Hop in a whip and I'm swerving, I'm smashed. Killing my enemies, one of my passion. Rocking this gold like we in bikini. Feel like the captain, I'm clutching a heater. Feel like they see me, I feel like I'm Saudi or ran up on Yana in the middle of Bamako. Enemy line, they claiming he innocent. Don't do no talking, I gotta move militant. Don't do no talking, I hit him with facts. 1804, bringing it back.